The Ottawa Senators are looking for consistency. Meanwhile, the Arizona Coyotes continue to surprise, and the Columbus Blue Jackets are dealing with growing pains. We've got all that and a lot more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe or on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. And you can find us on SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just do a search for Locked On NHL. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code Locked On NHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the co-host of Locked On Senators, Ross Levitan. And Ross, a little bit of an inconsistent start to the season for the Sens. What's gone right and where are they struggling?
On ice, we're talking, because
yes, for now.
There's been a circus outside of the organization, of course, with the losing of the first-round draft pick because of the Evgeny Dadonov trade debacle, Shane Pinto's 41-game suspension. And on ice, it's been a struggle to find consistency in their own zone in particular. This team has given up way too many of those momentum goals that listeners of LOSP will certainly recognize Pilsy and I talking about in the last 2 minutes of a period, the first 2 minutes of the period, and 2 minutes after a goal scored for either team. The Senators either score and then give one right back before they even announce it in the building. It just feels like there's so many breakdowns, so many poor giveaways, and it's really costing them at the end of the day. There's been maybe 2 or 3 games where you're hoping your goalie could make that extra save, keep you into it. But this team, they haven't really started on time a lot. They've been down. They were down 5-1 to Buffalo. They make it respectable 6-4 loss. They're down 3-0 to LA late. They make that 3-2. So they're making these games look respectable on the scoreboard. But at the end of the day, a loss is a loss. And this is a fan base that is past moral victories. They're past the fact that the offense looks great. They just want results consistently, and it just has not happened yet, Gil.
How much do you think the off-ice problems or issues are affecting the on-ice performance?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think if we were to power rank it, the number one would probably be the fans making their feelings known. After the game against LA last Thursday, this team was not only booed off the ice, but they were also chanting "Fire DJ" to the head coach, DJ Smith, who nobody can say a bad word about DJ Smith, the person. He goes out of his way to support causes. He's wearing his PWHL Ottawa sweater. Like he's very community driven, very amicable in the media. But sometimes the strategy, it's just not lining up. They play a very heavy dump and chase type system. And for the teams he used to have when it was in the rebuild, you understood that. You're like, okay, we're just going to try to outwork our opponents. That's always been the philosophy. We're going to outwork you. But now you're seeing a team with so much skill, you almost feel like you're cutting up their potential when you're making them, forcing a Vladimir Tarasenko to not carry the puck over the blue line and instead, hey, just chip and chase it. Just chip and chase it. So I think fans made their feelings known on that one. I liked how fans made their feelings known. They shouldn't be. They had 5 straight home losses to start the season after winning their first 3. So fans are right to be disgruntled. But I also like how the captain, Brady Tkachuk, and the leader of this team, Claude Giroux, went back and said, no, DJ's our coach. So leave him alone. Like, this is on us, the players, to get it together. So from that standpoint, my answer to you is it's not affecting them, but come on. I mean, not only that, but you add on the compounds of the 2 other situations I just mentioned, Pierre Dorion ultimately being fired because of one of those with the loss of the first round draft pick. So there's been a lot of noise outside the organization at a time where new ownership's just taking over as well. So it really is chaotic outside, and that's why it almost feels like a good time. And Sens fans are very wary about going to Sweden. Last time they went to Sweden in 2018, they had just traded for Matt Duchene. Everybody was looking forward to a repeat after they made it to the conference final. What happens? They come home after winning both of those games, and they lose 19 out of 21 games, and their season, their franchise fell apart. So I'm really curious to see how these two games go against Detroit, a divisional matchup on Thursday, and then Saturday against Minnesota, both in Stockholm.
You mentioned the fans taking out their frustrations on the coach. How hot would you say his seat is right now?
I would have said it's the hottest seat in the NHL, but clearly I would have been wrong, as we're recording this moments after Jay Woodcroft has become the first coach fired this year. Chris Knobloch is going to take over. He's McDavid's old junior coach. So he wasn't a guy whose name's been circulating. There's been rumors all over ever since. I mean, Patrick Waugh interviewed for this job in 2019 when DJ Smith ultimately got it. But now that he stepped away from the Quebec Rempart, where he won a Memorial Cup last year as their head coach and GM, there were some rumors that he was in Ottawa last week. I don't think they would interview for a head coaching job while the coach was still there, but that's made Sens fans start to believe that potentially he could be in the running for a general manager position, because we know that the setup that the Senators are going to have now, and some fans of other teams are like, you think? Like, this has been the way for years. But Ottawa finally has a president of hockey operations for the first time ever, and Steve Staios is going to be in control of what happens with this team. So I would very much welcome Patrick Waugh into the organization in any capacity. You had a Hall of Famer, a 3-time Stanley Cup champion. You're only going to be better, especially I don't think Patty Waugh is going to be accepting defensive lapses the way that, we've seen in Ottawa recently. So I think his seat is very hot. Patrick Waugh is a name. Claude Julien is another name people would be familiar with. He's actually a pro scout for the St. Louis Blues right now, but based in Ottawa. He's had some health issues in recent years, so he's been at the games over and over and over again. So if there's a guy who's had a bird's eye view of this team and maybe knows how to put his systems and structure and stamp on it, he could be a guy they go with. But I think they're going to give DJ Smith every opportunity to battle his way out of it. One, the players haven't quit on him. They're still working out there. It's just more of like a scheme thing versus an effort thing. So the players are still playing for him out there. He's signed through the rest of this season. So if you just wait it out, again, how long can you wait? How patient will fans be? That's another point. But then the third point, and probably the most important, and Steve Staios has been very, very quick to mention this, they need some calm around the organization. And they're not going to get it if they then go ahead and make another move, a major move. So I think they're going to ride this out probably until Christmas. So maybe that turns the seat heater down a couple notches.
And what will it take on the ice to get this team more consistent to sort of turn this season around?
Yeah, it's kind of a catch-22 because you don't want to take away the offense that these players are providing. But for example, if you had asked me which player needs to improve the most so far through the first 12, 13 games of the season, one of my first answers would be Tim Stützle. I think that he's given the puck away a ton at his own blue line. He's having trouble on entries, giveaways at both blue lines, really. But then you look at it, and he's leading the team in scoring. He's got 17 points in 13 games, and he's being a superstar. So at the same time, it's like, okay, how much, like, where do you find the balance is the real question, Gil. And that's something that the Sens are still struggling to find. Because if you look at it, both Vegas and Boston, probably the crown jewels of the league, they each have 5 players in double-digit points. The Senators have played two less games than most everyone else in the league. They have 7 players with 10 or more points this season. So offense is the last of their concerns, and defense is their biggest worry. Now, one thing I should mention as well is they have had 3 defensemen out of the lineup for a majority of the season. You saw in that game against the Islanders, Eric Brandstrom had to be taken off in a stretcher. It was great to see him return last night, his first game since that incident. You had Artem Zub take an Ovechkin shot off the ear. He had a concussion, missed a couple weeks. He's been back 2 games. And now Thomas Chabot's the lone guy still out, but he's also your highest paid defenseman. So you're looking for him to get back in the mix and really help get this team, because their depth was tested. They lost a ton of games without those 3 guys, but it's more of a 5-man defending that they need to figure out, because right now it's unsustainable success. But they have won 2 of their last 3, both against Canadian opponents. They lost to Vancouver. They beat Calgary and Toronto this week. So This team, they're the headline hogs, Gil. They really are. They every day there's a new drama, a new story around this team. But I truly believe that the pieces in place from the top line, Tim Stützle, Claude Giroux, Brady Tkachuk, and probably the biggest surprise of the year has been Jacob Chikrin's offensive ability. He's up at a point per game, tied for the league lead with goals among defensemen with 5. So there's a lot to be excited about in Ottawa, but also a lot to worry about. We're trying to do our best to balance the two of those things.
Well, never a dull moment, that's for sure. Maybe you could use a few. But Ross, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you and your co-host on social media?
Yes, we're on Twitter at Sen Central, LockedOn.Senators on Instagram. The show is free and available on all podcast platforms, including on YouTube. We're on top of 5 days a week. We also provide post-game coverage. So we say the postcast is where we vent or vibe. It's dependent on the result. We've obviously had a lot more venting these days, but people can find us on YouTube or wherever they find their podcasts.
Ross, thanks so much. Always a pleasure.
My pleasure, Gil. Appreciate you.
Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the co-host of Locked On Coyotes, Robyn Leano. And Robyn, the Coyotes are a pleasant surprise to a lot of people this year. Why? How are they doing this?
They've just been making all the right moves lately. I think it goes back to the offseason and picking up some of the players that they did. I want to go back kind of essentially, I think, to the trade for Sean Durzi, for example. Like, I think a lot of people gave them a little bit of praise for it, but they were still like not given enough credit for it. But he's been an integral part to the Coyotes defense ever since he's joined the team. And just overall, this team has looks like they're having a lot of fun out there. I was at practice last Monday, and even despite that, coming back from the weekend, having lost over the weekend, they still look like they're having fun on the ice, and they're just having great chemistry. And I think that's a really key part to having a good hockey team.
It definitely does help. And look, we've been talking over the last couple of years, whenever you've been on the show, that this team was putting together a lot of draft picks, a lot of young players. And now we're seeing some of those young players start to pay dividends. How important have those players been to the success of this team?
Oh, they've been fantastic. Logan Cooley, for example, has easily been one of the top rookies in the league. He just over the weekend on Saturday night, he got a 3-assist night. So he's consistently been impressed. And yeah, sure, he'll go through nights where he doesn't show, but that every player does. And I think you'd be foolish to, if every Coyotes found that out there, to expect him to score or to get any points every night.
Yeah, no question about that. Talk to me about Clayton Keller. I mean, he has been red hot to start the season. What does he bring to the table for this team?
Yeah, Keller is just, I think he's that cornerstone piece for the Arizona Coyotes. He's that piece that no matter what, I think everyone's talked. It's like, oh, what are you going to what is it going to take to trade for Clayton Keller? That's not going to happen. I feel like he's such that cornerstone piece. It's a piece that brings the team together. And I think that's one of the main things that when it comes to that chemistry, I feel like he's that cornerstone piece for that. I think that kind of helps with his performance and everybody else's performance on the ice.
The power play has been clicking at a very high rate, top 10 in the league right now. What have they been doing so successfully that's helped the power play click?
I think it's a lot has to do with getting the lines right. I think there's still a little tweaking to do on that lines, but I believe the top power play line you have Clayton Keller alongside Logan Cooley. I think that's like you put those two players together, something's gonna happen. I personally and my co-host Matthew Jacobson will back me up on this as he said multiple times in the show. Would like to see Logan Cooley on the second power play unit. That way that it kind of adds to, hey, he gets his own unit and he's able to actually be the guy and score more. But hey, right now, if it's, you can't, don't fix what's not broke.
Absolutely. There aren't a lot of household names nationally on this Coyotes team. Give our viewers and our listeners an idea of some players that they should look at next time they watch the Coyotes that they may not be familiar with.
I mean, I think it goes to some of the players on the defense. I mean, the players that people recognize that just have been underrated on some of their former teams. Dumba and Dursey have been integral pieces to the Arizona Coyotes. Yusuf Valimaki has been a fantastic addition to the Arizona Coyotes defense, and I think he's I think he's been great. Someone that not very many people even know about, and there's not much really I can say outside of that. I mean, because there's so much. It's like a lot of these players are just adding so much depth to the team, and I think that's the most important part.
No doubt about that. How about the goaltending? What are your thoughts so far? Because it seems like when Connor Ingram is in, they win, and yet his numbers are roughly comparable to Vejmelka's numbers. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, I think the coaching staff is doing a phenomenal job on making sure that each goalie is getting a fair number of starts and making sure they get their rest when they need it, which is a huge breath of fresh air when I compare it to the previous coaching regime. Previous coaching regime, after they got down to their third string goaltender because their top two are injured, and they start that third string 10 straight or 12 straight games in a row. And then eventually that player gets injured because guess what? You can't do that. So it's a breath of fresh air, getting a healthy mix in there, making sure every player, every goalie gets their reps. And it's nice too. It's his perfect tandem. I think Connor Ingram's been fantastic, as a great tandem to Vejmelka. And I feel like that's kind of a team that's going to help them, take some wins and steal some wins.
So what is the one thing you think this team needs to improve the most to sort of take it to the next level?
So yeah, Matthew and I have talked about this on our show multiple times, and it's a team that needs to play a full 60 minutes and needs to learn how to play with the lead. A lot of the wins that they've had, minus the Chicago win, because that's a very different kind of game that they were playing there. But a lot of the times that they've won, they've played from behind to start, or they've had some kind of adversity to overthrow. This is a team that just cannot play with a lead for some reason. I'm going to go ahead and turn to a game against the Los Angeles Kings when they were up a decent amount. They were up like 3-1 or 4-1, whatever it was. They blow that lead and take a loss. Same thing, or if any, I think even a little bit to the Kraken, if I'm not mistaken, if that was another game. But it's a team that just having those problems playing with the lead, and I feel like they can overcome those, but it's a young team, so you can only expect so much.
Do you think that this team can be in the playoff hunt or maybe even sneak into the playoffs this year based on the start? Can they sustain it?
Yeah, another thing we've talked about is whether or not that's the case. We've said multiple times on the show, and I've even told you, but kind of going into the season, that this team will flirt with a playoff spot. That this team is going to be kind of like around there. Maybe they'll have a few weeks, maybe a month in the playoff position, but maybe not make it. My personal belief has changed a little bit, rather than my co-host. I think this team has the tools to maybe barely sneak it in. I think this team could potentially make it in at that second wild card spot, based off what I'm seeing right now. And again, that's saying barely sneak it in. It's like, don't be surprised if they do. Be pleasantly surprised if they do, but don't be surprised if they don't.
All right. Well, it's certainly a much more interesting season than a lot of people expected before we got started. Robyn, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you and your co-host on social media?
Yeah, you can find our podcast everywhere you get your podcasts. Also on the Sirius XM radio app, if anyone's a Sirius XM subscriber. Also, you can find us ad free on Amazon Music. You can. I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys have want to listen on there as well. Social media, we're on X at LO_Coyotes, and I'm personally at Robyn with the Y_Leano.
All right, Robyn, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Of course.
Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. A new NHL season brings all sorts of possibilities. Your favorite player could score 50 goals. Your team could hoist the Stanley Cup. And you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our #1 choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether studs like McDavid, Ovechkin, Crosby, or McKinnon will record more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more in a given game. To win a 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, NHL fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL. You'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show a familiar face to Locked On NHL viewers and a familiar voice for Locked On NHL listeners, Jay Foster of Locked On Blue Jackets. And Jay, not the greatest start for the Blue Jackets. A lot of inconsistency. What's going on?
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing, isn't it? Is this is a very, very young team. This is a team with a lot of new moving parts and a brand new head coach that took the job, I think, 4 days before training camp started. We don't need to get into all of the drama about that, but this is kind of what I think should have been expected, and I was kind of blinded by the shiny new toy energy of Adam Fantilli and Pascal Vincent saying all the right things, and like, the team isn't bad. The team is playing much better than last year, but it's growing pains. You know, it's you can kind of see. You can see how young this team is. You can see even some of the older players, the veteran players, Damon Severson, Ivan Provorov, they're playing in new systems. They're learning how these new systems work, so maybe I should have been more expected for inconsistency than I was, but like looking back and thinking about it, like this is about what I expected. I think the thing that frustrates me the most at the minute is it feels like either the Blue Jackets have a good night offensively, or they have a good night defensively, or they have a good night in goal. Sometimes they have two of those three, but I don't think I've seen a game yet where all three positions have shown up for the Blue Jackets. And so I think that's what's really frustrating is they have all of the pieces. They just can't seem to fit them together in the right way for 60 minutes yet.
Yeah, and then we sort of see instances where, for example, they'll take a 2-0 lead and then end up losing the game. Inconsistency even within a period or a game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I've seen so many Blue Jackets games this season that are like, wow, that first period was amazing. Oh, the second period was real bad. Oh, the third period was really good again. Or, we see like 40 minutes of really solid hockey from these guys and then 20 minutes where it just kind of falls apart. And I get it. That's, again, young team. I think the second youngest team in the NHL. But God, it's annoying to watch sometimes. I will say, to give them credit, like, they look so much better than last season. And whether that's because they're healthy, because Pascal Vincent is kind of putting the right players together and is kind of taking steps forward. I'm seeing competitive hockey from a lot of the players, and for periods of time, you're seeing what I don't think we saw at all last season, which is like, this looks like a team that wants to win. They just haven't quite taken the final steps yet, and it feels like when they do figure it out, this team is going to be a whole lot of fun and it's going to be real good. They just have to figure it out.
Talk to me about Adam Fantilli. I mean, such high expectations. Third on the team in scoring, not off to a bad start. How does he look so far to you?
I tried so hard to temper my expectations for Adam Fantilli going into this season because I've seen it before where people get really excited about a player and he's never going to live up to those expectations. Adam Fantilli is not scoring as much as I think a lot of people wanted him to, especially with the news of, Leo Carlsson just got his first career hat trick. Connor Bedard, I think at the time of recording this, has like 6 points in his last 2 games or something insane like that. Adam Fantilli is consistently the best player on whatever line he's playing on. He is driving the offense. He is making these little plays. He's not scoring, but that will come. He's not necessarily passing to. He's not getting as many assists as I think he will. The team needs to figure out what the best combination of players to put with Adam Fantilli is. But so far, he is exceeding expectations. I'm so impressed with how he looks, and he's getting better every game. You can almost like physically see him figure things out sometimes of like, oh, this worked in college, but it doesn't work here. Let me try that again, but do something else, and it works the next time. And he's just so fun to watch. I'm so happy with Adam Fantilli.
Now, one player who's very frustrated right now, Johnny Gaudreau, actually even benched during a game. Talk to me about his struggles and how are they trying to get him back on track?
There's something up with Johnny Gaudreau this season, and I'm not sure what it is, and I don't want to like speculate about players' health or players' personal lives or anything like that, but he just doesn't look like the Johnny Gaudreau we got last season or the Johnny Gaudreau that they had in Calgary the year before that, and I don't know what it is, and I can't quite figure it out. But he's not scoring, which is not necessarily a bad thing because he's more of a playmaker anyway, and like there's just something's not right with Gaudreau at the minute, and I can't figure out what it is. He's struggling big time. And the benching was a big thing of like, wow, why are you benching your $9.5 million player? Blah blah blah. I was okay with it. In hindsight, Pascal Vincent is doing this new thing where he like holds everybody accountable regardless of who you are. There was a whole big drama about Kent Johnson getting a new agent and then getting sent down to Cleveland, and everyone immediately lost their mind about how Kent Johnson was going to demand a trade, and he's benched Damon Severson for periods of time. He's not afraid to bench long tenured NHL players, despite the fact that he's been a head coach for about 5 minutes, in the grand scheme of things. So it's I don't love that we have to bench Johnny Gaudreau. I don't think he was playing badly, but the way that Pascal Vincent has kind of conducted himself thus far into the season, the things he says, the things he does, like I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. He knows a lot more about hockey than I do, after all. So if he thinks that Johnny Gaudreau needed benching, then sure, okay, Pascal. Something needs to switch up with Johnny. I don't know what it is, whether it's line mates, whether it's ice time, whether it's like matchups. I don't know, but there's something. I just keep coming back to that. Like something feels off about Gaudreau that I can't put my finger on. It does worry me a little bit.
How did he respond to the benching?
I believe he scored a goal in his next game. Admittedly, it was an empty netter, but hey, they don't ask how, they ask how many. He's kind of cooled off a little bit again since then. I don't know that he's being used to his full advantage. With the lineup the way it is at the minute, Pascal Vincent has either been playing him. He's mostly stuck Boone Jenner with him, which I like that as a duo. But his other winger has either been Jack Roslovic, who is such a hot and cold player, who is in a real cold streak at the minute after a couple of games of being really hot, or Patrick Laine, who I know everyone got really excited about the Gaudreau-Laine matchup, but those players don't seem to gel, which that's fine. Players don't. And I think if you split them up, then you can have two even more balanced lines. But he's not really being put in a position to succeed at the minute. And I know there's an argument of like, well, he's been paid, what is it, $9.75 million, I think is how much he's making. He should be able to figure it out without being put in a position to succeed. But like, if you're paying that much money for a player, why would you not want to make it as easy as possible for him? So he'll figure it out. Players have slow starts, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes on a real hot streak, maybe, in the next couple of weeks, and you see kind of a return to Johnny Gaudreau. And with that, probably what you will see is everything else will kind of get bumped up as well, because usually when your star players are producing, everyone else kind of follows suit.
What are the keys to righting the ship right now and getting this team back on track?
100%. Yeah, there's a bunch of different things that have kind of gone on, and I think a lot of it is, again, we go back to growing pains, we go back to new head coach, we go back to Pascal Vincent figuring out what the best combination of players is. And I think he's made some really good decisions in some places, and I think he's made some not so good decisions in other places. As of the time of recording this, the Blue Jackets dropped the puck in about 2 hours, and we don't know what the lineup for that game is yet. So, like, we'll see. Maybe that'll change. But I think there are some lines that maybe aren't working that he needs to switch up. There are some lines I think he should keep. I think goaltending is a big thing. The goaltending, again, I don't think it's been bad. It's been better than last season, but like that was a low bar to clear. I don't think it's been as bad as some of the more dramatic members of the Blue Jackets fan base and people on Twitter have kind of been saying. But I would like the goaltending to be just a little bit better. Or failing that, I would like games where, again, this kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier. I would love a game where the defense and the goaltending and the scoring all showed up in the same game, because right now it feels like the Blue Jackets are either winning games 5-4, or they're losing games 5-4, or they're winning games like 2-1, but their goalie is making like 41 or 42 saves while they're getting 20 shots a game. So like, would love for everyone to turn up at once. And I think when they figure out the kind of the weird wonkiness that the defense is going through right now, I think the goaltending will rebound a little bit. But there's nothing like, I spent a lot of time last season looking at this team and being like, wow, there are a lot of things wrong here. We have to really work to kind of, we have to tear this house down and start again, but I'm looking at this season. I'm like, okay, this house has good bones. Pascal Vincent has things to build on. He's got a solid foundation. I'm not worried yet. If we're still having this conversation in like a month's time, then I might start to worry. But right now I'm like, yeah, all of this makes sense. I wish it would come together just a little bit sooner than it is.
Well, we'll keep an eye on that for sure. Jay, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
So you can find me at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER on Twitter. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets over on Twitter. We're on YouTube. We're on every podcasting app you can possibly think of. Wherever you find Locked On NHL, you can find Locked On Blue Jackets there as well. And one day soon, we will have an episode where we get to talk about a win. I truly believe this.
All right, Jay, thank you so much. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for having me, Gil.
All right, I want to thank my guests. I want to thank Ross Levitan of Locked On Senators, Robyn Leano of Locked On Coyotes, and Jacob Foster of Locked On Blue Jackets. I'm Gil Martin. I am here every Monday, and I co-host the Friday edition of the show along with Rachel Donner. I want to thank everyone for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Everydayers, we bring you the biggest stories from around the National Hockey League every Monday through Friday. So make sure you join us for that. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and thanks for listening to and watching the Locked On NHL podcast.